Photo Redux time. All right, so we are back with Photo Redux in 2018, even though we are 27 days into the new year. It's been a bit of a busy January. Just got back a few days ago from a trip to the Canadian Rockies, which was all sorts of awesome. But, you know, things don't stop, and I've been getting some questions about where are the new Photo Redux. So here we go with episode 9. Now, this one goes back to 2009, so not quite 10 years ago, but getting there. And it was taken in, if I remember correctly, somewhere in Somerville, like I think Porter Square Station, if I remember correctly, but I know it was in Somerville or Cambridge. It was in Massachusetts. So this is the thing. Some of the episodes that we're going to start doing in Photo Redux will be more on the kind of grungier urbex side of things. And that's because back in around 2007 through about 2012, I was like obsessed with urbex, with that kind of grungy HDR, cross-processed, just goodness. And with this image, when you see it, you're going to scream just like that. And there's a good reason why. It is atrocious. I mean, I'd say it's one of the worst edited photos I've ever done in my life, and that's saying something. I love the composition. It was taken with my Funkbuster 15mm fisheye lens, easily one of my favorite lenses, which I just realized I gave to Nicole. I thought I sold it. I actually gave it to her. She still has it, so I'm going to order an adapter and start using it because I miss that lens a lot. With that said, that's one of the more interesting things I like about this series is that when the composition's good, but the editing is bad, you know, when good comps go bad. And that's what happened here. I mean, no bones about it. It's a really, really bad edit. It's okay. You can say it. You know, I'll hear it. I'll take it. I deserve it. But I'm really excited because there's some really cool things we can do with Lightroom and Photoshop and just have some good times. So with that, before we switch over to the computer, I want to remind you, please hit this thumbs up button. Let me know if you like the video. Leave any questions down in the comments. And most importantly, please subscribe and hit that little bell icon so you get notifications for new videos. Again, 2018 is a big year for me with videos, and there's a lot coming. So with that, let's go stylize. All right, so you can see it right over there, right? That's the photo. Let's take a closer look and just yikes, right? It's awful. It's ruined. There's some sort of a bleach bypass. There's cross-processing. And get this, even though, look, if I go to the grid view, I have brackets over here, but even though I tone mapped, somehow I ruined the exposure. We've got completely blown out highlights. Shadows are crushed. It's just that's the funny thing, especially around the 2008 and 2009 time, as I look more and more at these photos, is even though I went to the process of bracketing the photos and then tone mapping, I still somehow managed to ruin those images. But that's why I really like Photo Redux, is because it gives me this opportunity to revisit these photos and also to show you that, listen, odds are you've got tons of photos from the past too that probably can stand, you know, a fresh coat of paint. So do it because it's a lot of fun. Now, before we begin, I want you to know that you can actually go to my website at matiash.com. If you're an Inbox Inspiration member and you go to this post, as well as all the other previous posts for Photo Redux, you can download follow-along photos and actually go along using the exact photo that we're going to be working on step by step. And don't worry, I'm using Lightroom CC, but if you're classic, those steps are exactly the same. You have the same sliders and all the same steps. In fact, you've got more opportunities because you can do HDR and Pano. I still can't do that yet, but if you have the follow-along photo, go ahead. Even if you're in classic, it's not a problem. So let's begin here and let's take a look at the grid view. And if we stair step through, it's really, you know, just basic brackets here. The thing that's funny is, again, I went through bracketing. I didn't even bracket properly because watch through all of I mean, I guess over here, you kind of have detail in these lights, but for the most part, I don't have the right brackets for the brightest parts of the image. So the thing is, we don't actually need to bracket here. Let me look at the info of this photo. This was taken with a 5D Mark II and again, the Funkbuster 15mm fisheye lens. And even though it's an old camera, the 5D Mark II, I think we can get away with just using a single exposure. I really don't think we need to tone map here, partly and especially because looking at the brackets, I don't have quite all of that highlight information that I'd want where tone mapping would benefit me. So with that, we're just going to work on this photo here. And to start, first thing I'm going to do is try to get a good white balance. So I'm just going to white balance right here off of the concrete. It does a pretty good job of removing that cast. You can see the light now is this kind of white, nice bright white. I can undo that and redo that. And you can see the difference. That kind of cast is gone. Although I will warm it up just a little bit, somewhere right around there. All right, cool. Now, next thing I'm going to do, let's just clean up this photo a little bit. I'm going to take my healing brush. Let's go right there and just kind of get rid of that. And we can hit O here to hide the overlay. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this one dust spot, that dust spot, and then just like little things here. And I'm going to fast forward the camera while I do this. All right, good. Now, don't worry if you were watching closely at how this is off, because towards the end, it'll make sense. We're not really going to be focusing on that area too much. And focus and area are two common themes for this photo. So with that, let's go back to editing here. And I'm going to start by fixing the highlights, basically the overall tone. So let's go ahead here. Let's Option or Alt click while clicking on highlights, bring that down. We're starting to recover those highlights, bring the white point in a little bit as well. Shadows, let's see, I think we're okay in the shadows. Yeah, for the most part. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get a relatively flat exposure, something that doesn't have too much contrast. And this is something I never did back in the day, was get an HDR or a photo flat first. This is important. The reason why you want a flat, it's similar to video. A lot of times you're going to hear videographers talk about log, shooting in log, as if it's raw, but it's not. What log is for video is it's kind of a desaturated flat look for your video. And the reason why you want that is because when you start to color grade your video, you have a lot more latitude to add contrast and color. Same exact thing goes here. I'm going for more of a flat look because it'll allow me to stylize more effectively here. So looking at the histogram, everything's looking good. Now I can go ahead and start working on a little bit of the stylization. So to begin, let's go here. We'll add some contrast. And I'm always looking at the histogram just to make sure. I'm also going to open up the overall exposure there. Let's option click on the highlights, see if we're still good there. That's nice. And now it's time to go to the tone curve. And I'm going to do this typical S curve, which adds some nice contrast. And like before, I'm going to open up the black point to introduce some gray into the shadows. Let's bring that down a little bit more. I see now it's starting to pop a little bit. All right, cool. So that's good there. I'm also going to switch over to the green channel here. And for the green channel, what I want to do is I still want to give this a kind of a funky post-apocalyptic look, just not one where the photo makes you cringe. So in that case, I'm going to go with a little bit of green tone in the highlights. So here you can see I'm introducing a little bit of this kind of greeny. I'm also going to go in split toning and add it, but here I'm just going to go there and then just a tiny bit in shadows go towards the magenta, like around there. All right, cool. So that's looking good there. Let's scroll down, add a little bit of vibrance. And then let's go over to split toning right off the bat. So in Lightroom CC, split toning is a little bit different than in Lightroom Classic. With Classic, you've got explicit sliders for the highlights and the shadows. You've got the hue slider and the saturation slider. With CC, it's slightly different, where you've got this dot here for highlights and on the left for shadows. So for highlights, I'm going to bring this over to green, and you can see how it's getting kind of that neon-y green. For the shadows, green and blue kind of play off each other really well. So I'm going to bring it right there. Let's add a little bit more green. Something like that is looking really nice. I'm going to go ahead here, add a little bit more contrast to the photo. That's looking cool. Then let's go down, add some clarity, a little bit of dehaze. And then for sharpening, let's zoom in on a sharp part somewhere like around there, press and hold the Option key or Alt key, and that'll turn into grayscale, which will make it easier for you to see the effects of sharpening. That's good. You don't want to over sharpen. Remember, one of the biggest mistakes from my original photo was that I over sharpened, and that's no good. Now let's remove sharpening using the masking slider, press and hold the Option key or the Alt key while dragging. And what this is doing is it's removing sharpening from smooth areas like that door on the left. And then here's a fun thing. I just want to show you this. Whenever you use a fisheye lens, if you turn on lens correction, I kind of love sometimes the effect that lens correction does for fisheye lenses. In a few cases, I think it actually improves the photo. In this case, I don't like it. The reason why I use a fisheye was I do love the way the pattern in the tiles, this checkered pattern, sort of curves towards the bottom. And it gives it, this photo, the kind of the station. You want to have that really interesting, these curvy lines and the way it kind of bends around towards this door. So earlier I said about area and focus. The reason for that is I specifically want to bring the focus to this door here. I can do that by using a radial filter or a vignette, but actually what I want to do is send it to Photoshop, and we're going to do some cool things there. So all I need to do is right click and then select edit in Photoshop to bring it there. All right, in Photoshop, let's just press Command or Control J to duplicate the layer. And now we're going to go to Filter, Blur Gallery, and then we'll start with Tilt Shift. I've used this before with some other photos, and I think it does a really nice job of drawing the focus for the viewer to a specific area, just using kind of a tilt shift blur effect. So first things first, let's kind of position the center point, and then let's rotate. I'm going to rotate this kind of diagonal, like almost like matching the path of the door. Then let's spread that out. The hard lines symbolize kind of the hard edge of the blur mask, and then the distance from the solid line to the broken line, that's your feather. So this is from in focus all the way to out of focus. Speaking of out of focus, the blur is a bit too strong. I'm going to drop that down to, let's try 12. And then let's open up that feather just a little bit. And just kind of looking at that, that's looking good. I like that. So next thing, let's just click on high quality. I don't need to wait for that preview to be done. I get an idea of what this is going to look like. So let's click OK to return back. And so you can see here, we can toggle. You can see that out of focus area where it's being applied to. Now, in terms of further drawing the eye, again, I could still just use a vignette or a radial filter, but I prefer in these cases to use a custom dodge and burn layer. It's pretty easy to do that. All you need to do is create a new layer, blank layer, press Shift Delete, and then we're going to fill it with 50% gray, and then change that blending mode from normal to overlay. And you can see here, if I toggle it, there is no change. That's because effectively this is now invisible. It's kind of like a canvas where you can brighten or darken, and you brighten and darken using your black and white foreground colors. So watch, if I go here and I select the brush tool, let's make a really nice big brush. I've got black as my foreground. So what happens here is that it's going to start darkening. And then one important point is that my opacity is really low. So watch, if I bring this up, see how dark it's getting in a single stroke, and that's obviously not good. So you want your brush opacity to be really low. So somewhere even 10% is okay. And then here you can see what I'm doing is I'm following areas that are already somewhat dark, and I'm further darkening them. So just kind of up here, get the door a little bit, and creating essentially, I'm just going to sculpt using dodging and burning. This way, it's unlike a vignette or even a radial filter, which still just darkens at an even rate around a certain point. Here, I'm actually controlling the specific shape of my dodge and burn. Now, I can also switch the color from black to white by pressing X, and that's going to brighten things. So you can see here what I'm doing is I'm brightening these areas that are already bright. It's kind of like adding contrast manually, like localized contrast. So press X and really want to create some nice contrast. All right, we are looking pretty good there. That's looking actually really cool. So you can see here, watch, let's just turn off. See how it's kind of, even though it's stylized, the layer is still kind of flat, but then we're able to sculpt, literally sculpt the light using that dodge and burn layer. It's a super simple, kind of like age-old technique. And it's one that I use a bunch. A lot of people have talked about it, and I think it's really important to introduce here. So with that, I think we're good here. Let's go ahead and save it, and we'll turn back to Lightroom. All right, so now that we are in Lightroom, I might just go ahead and all that talk of vignette, I think I'm going to add one just a little bit, just to further draw the eye towards the center. And I think that's looking pretty good. I actually really like it. Again, I'm still going for that kind of urbex grungy look. So if you take this photo and you compare it to that photo, now I can see I tightened the crop here, which is why it doesn't look exactly the same, but this is inexcusable by pretty much any standard. So I think you'll agree with me. And then if you look at this photo, to me, it still has that grungy overtone, and it has, like, for instance, the greens and highlights. It fits for that kind of an urbexy grungy look. But again, we didn't have to use tone mapping. It's not an HDR photo. And we were just able to get clever with some of the stylization techniques and dodging and burning, and then that tilt shift blur, I think, really brings this photo to a nice place, a place where I'm happy with. I think it looks awesome. It directs the eye exactly where I want it to go. So with that, again, hope you enjoyed episode 9 of Photo Redux. Don't forget, head over to Matiash.com if you want to sign up to Inbox Inspiration and download this follow-along photo. Please hit the thumbs up if you like the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.